Hacía muchísimo tiempo que tenía ganas de hacer una entrevista referida a Padre de Familia. Había hablado por mail hace quizás 3 años con uno de los guionistas. Redoblé la apuesta porque conseguí al actual showrunner que me contó detalles de lo que va a ser la próxima temporada, donde vamos a tener, por ejemplo, la primera palabra de Stewie, que acá dice cuál es, incluso vamos a saber quién reemplaza al alcalde Adam West, pero también hablamos de lo que fue la gestión y la cocina de un montón de chistes y de gente que se enojó de verdad, actores, por ejemplo, que son insultados, entre comillas, porque esto no deja de ser humor, y que se han quejado con el propio Seth MacFarlane. Hablamos de quiénes son los que están inmunes, que no pueden tocarse con ningún tipo de chistes, y un montón de cosas más que vas a ver en este informe sobre Padre de Familia.
Oh my God, Peter, are you all right?
It's not in the works right now, but I know that Seth wants to make one. You know, he talks a lot about, you know, when we do the movie. I think I have an idea for the movie. You know, I want the show to run at least until we do the movie, like all this kind of stuff. So I know that he sees the movie as like a big part of Family Guy in the next, you know, I would say 5 years.
Okay.
But he also may see the movie as like an end point of the whole thing.
I went back to visit Jesus Christ. Turns out his abilities might have been exaggerated a bit.
This show is well known for how it laughs at what's politically correct, if you have to put it in a way. So can you tell me about the limits in this matter, or if you regret of any jokes that you wrote for the show?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a you know, Family Guy's lucky because I think they have a reputation for being irreverent. So it's, you know, we like to say that we make fun, we're an equal opportunity insulter. You know, we'll make fun of just everybody the same way. And we do try to do that, but certainly there are times when we come up against standards, you know, the folks at the network who will say, like, you just cannot do a certain joke. So that has happened a few times, and we either will change the joke to make it acceptable, or we'll just scrap it and say, well, we need to either be totally offensive or not do it at all. But it's an ongoing process with standards. You know, they have notes about every episode, and some of them we can fight and win, and others we just have to change.
Yeah, I once I talked with the creator of Ren and Stimpy, and he told me that they on purpose wrote a few like jokes that were crossing the line so far in order to like put the attention there. Do you do the same thing?
We actually have a couple of times done that where, you know, we know that we're going to have trouble with a certain thing that we really like. So we have these other things that we kind of just throw in that we don't even really like. And we know that if we say, okay, well, we'll cut those two, but we want to keep this, that can work.
Stewie, did Mr. Jackson behave inappropriately toward you?
Well, yes, but the worst part was he never called back.
Who and when can understand Stewie when he's speaking?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So the general rule is that Brian obviously can understand him, and now Chris can understand him. That we had an episode many seasons ago where that started. We felt like it would be helpful for the show to have Stewie have one more person who could talk directly to him. So we had it be Chris, and then we have it that it's like random adults in the town can talk to him. Like if he's just doing some jokes with like weird people in the middle of the town, they understand him. And then of course the rest of the family does not. Most importantly, Lois and Peter don't understand him. But we actually have an episode coming up next season where Stewie says his first word, and it's fuck.
What changed when Fox was bought by Disney in terms of maybe limits, in terms of jokes, or maybe the way that you worked?
Well, you know, I don't know that we fully know how much has changed because it's still pretty new. But I will say that, you know, with Fox and 20th, there had been years and years of working on the show, you know, together. And so everybody kind of understood everything, you know, like everybody figured out a long time ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, that this is the way the show's going to go. And in every show, it'll be the same kind of way. So when we went to Disney, there was a whole new group of people that we're dealing with, and maybe they don't necessarily know it all right away. So there were some growing pains. And I think an interesting thing is that, we used to do a lot of Star Wars stuff on the show.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
Isn't a parsec a unit of distance, not time?
And then we kind of were not able to do that when Disney bought Star Wars like a few years ago. They were just much more protective of Star Wars things, so we couldn't really even do the bare minimum Star Wars stuff. And so then we thought, when we were getting bought by Disney, we're like, oh, well, this will be good. Like, we'll be back in with the Star Wars thing. They still won't let us do anything.
I'm saying the Simpsons suck. Why, you?
What about the rivalry between Simpsons and Family Guy? What do you think of this? And you then did a crossover episode. Can you tell me how was like finding the right tune where you can maybe sing the same song?
Well, yes, and that's a good way of putting it. I feel like the rivalry between The Simpsons and Family Guy does not exist anymore. And I feel like to the extent that it ever was a rivalry, it was very one-sided. You know, it was like everybody who works on Family Guy, including Seth, looks up to The Simpsons and what they did and how they opened this all up for us. And like Seth loves The Simpsons, like as do I. I mean, I grew up watching them and thinking it was just the greatest thing on TV.
You know, when I first met you, I thought, hey, I love this guy. This is the funniest guy I've ever met. I'm going to quote this guy to all my friends. I love his town. I love his family.
And so, I think the rivalry, when it existed, was more like The Simpsons kind of saying, like, there was this new little brother in town that they were just like, what the hell are you doing? Stop imitating me, stop copying me. And of course Family Guy just wanted to hang out with The Simpsons. Yeah. Like we just wanted to be like them. And I think that after a certain amount of years, and there's been a lot of cross-pollination in the writers' staff. Like we've gotten some people from The Simpsons, and then even outside of Family Guy, a bunch of the Family Guy writers have worked with a bunch of the Simpsons writers on other projects. And so we've all become friendly. And so that's really what helped the crossover episode happen, was that members of our writing staff either used to be Simpsons writers or were very good friends with Simpsons writers. And so when we pitched to them, hey, we'd like to do this episode, they were much more open to it, Yeah. Whereas, of course, if we had done that in the first few seasons of the show, they would have said, no way.
Yeah.
But, because we waited and everybody was just quietly enjoying their careers and all that kind of stuff and just taking money to the bank, it's like, okay, I think we can work together on this stupid thing.
And what about when you make fun of people, like in a mean way? You make fun of famous people, not so famous people, but do you have any trouble with that?
Adrian Brody doing sit-ups in 3D.
1, 2.
Luckily, we haven't had any legal issues with celebrities, coming after us and saying that's slander, that's too mean. But I have heard several stories from Seth, who I feel badly for, because like he'll say when he goes out to parties in Hollywood, suddenly like Adrian Brody will be up in his face, like, yelling at him, or apparently like Bradley Cooper was very mad with him, for like did a whole run about him.
Renee dates Bradley Cooper. We really need somebody who has not been the best thing in anything he's ever been in ever. I mean, the kind of guy who can get overshadowed by Zach Galifianakis or Ed Helms.
And sometimes he doesn't even know, like Seth records, he's not involved in the writing anymore, and he records things, but I'm sure he just forgets them after he records them, and people will come up to him and say, like, you insulted me, and he's just like, I had nothing to do with it, I don't remember. But yeah, I think he gets, he has a few people that are kind of pissed at him, and he also has people do this very smart thing, which is like a lot of different celebrities. I'm thinking of like maybe Mindy Kaling, Jimmy Fallon, like these different people have reached out to Seth, sent him a letter saying like, hey man, I just wanted to let you know I'm such a huge fan of the show. You're doing great work, great job. So then whenever we'll write a joke about any of them, Seth will text me back saying like, they're a huge fan of the show, don't do it. So it's like,
Jesus Christ, at our dinner table.
I'm actually glad you're all here tonight. I want to tell you that one of you will betray me. Nah, just kidding.
that was all Seth's idea. I think that he liked my voice just because it's very flat. And then like most of the characters that I'll play on the show are like people who are like unimpressed, and they're just kind of like, very blasé and flat and all that. And I think that he wanted that for Jesus, because I don't think that he wanted Jesus to be like this over the top, like joke guy. And so, it's great getting to do it, especially because I don't have to change my voice at all.
Okay, everybody, I know you were expecting something else, but as science will tell you, people were a lot shorter 2,000 years ago.
But in terms of people coming up and complaining to me, that's never happened. Well, first of all, the people that I know that I play Jesus I either work with or like my family, so nobody really gives a shit.
Yeah.
And then, most people in the world, if anyone did have a complaint, they don't know really who I am, so nobody's coming to find me.
It was my understanding that everyone had heard.
Heard what?
Brian, don't!
Oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. A bird, a well, a bird, bird, bird. A bird, a well.
Okay, so I'll tell you exactly how that began. We were sitting around in the writer's room. Seth was there. And I remember we were trying, we had this idea that Peter was going to, like, latch on to some kind of record, like his favorite song, like, and we'd hear it over and over again. And so Seth, I remember asking us, he's like, what's just a ridiculous song? Like, what's just an incredibly silly nonsense kind of song? And so we were sitting around there, and so then this one writer who's been there since the beginning, a very, very funny writer named Danny Smith, he came back. He had been out like getting a snack or something, and he came back into the room, and he's great with music. And so when he came in, I remember saying to him, I'm like, yeah, Danny, we're trying to think of a ridiculous nonsense song that Peter would love. And like without missing a beat, he just said Surfing Bird by the Trash Man. And so then like we pulled it up and we listened to it, and we were all laughing, and we're like, oh my God, that's perfect. So it was one of those things where we had started to try and think about it, and then one of our writers came in and just solved it in like 1 second.
Yeah.
And obviously since then we've referred to it probably 100 times.
Excuse me, Mayor West?
How do you know my language?
Listen to me. My entire future is in your hands.
Are you Sarah Connor?
He has such a great legacy on the show. He was so funny. Obviously, you can hear it in his jokes and the records. Like, his voice is just amazing, and he totally gets the joke, and it was fine to be weird and silly. But his legacy is huge. I mean, obviously, we just renamed the high school James Woods High School after Adam West, and he's incredibly hard to replace. That said, we are replacing him coming this season with a new mayor who's going to be played by Sam Elliott, and we're saying that he's Mayor West's cousin, Wild West. And so then he comes to town, and he'll be the new mayor. And he just started, so it's unfair to compare the two. But just Adam West has very, very big shoes to fill, and that's why it took us so long to even try.
Ryan, look out!
I think that there was a lot of talk about that, but I think that the idea was, and they were right, that it would generate a lot of interest in the show.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, what's absurd is just that people would write a review saying like, oh, the fans were so mad that they brought Brian back. It's like, we have to have these shows in the pipeline getting made like over a year ahead of time. So it's just kind of ridiculous to think that within like a 2-week stretch, we could say like, oh my God, let's write a whole new episode where Brian comes back. It's like we had that planned forever. And I think that if you knew Seth, then you would have known that to kill Brian would never happen. Like, he would never just leave the show, because Brian is the closest to Seth of any of the characters.
In terms of what? In terms of like...
In terms of like the voice, first of all, like that's what Seth sounds like. And also the political view. Like, you know, Seth is very liberal, very democratic, and also like a little bit full of shit. So like I think that he kind of likes that, making fun of himself in that way. Working with Seth when he was there in the room running the show was fantastic, because the number of voices that he does, you know, Peter, Stewie, Brian, Quagmire, Seamus, Tom, the list goes on and on. And so if we're ever pitching jokes for those characters, and he could just come up with something and use the voice, so we just knew right away, oh, that's exactly how it will sound on the show. And it was invaluable to have that. And also he's incredibly funny, so the things that he would pitch were not only, you know, right in character voice, but they were also just hilarious. So he was by far the best writer that the show's ever had, because he created all these characters and he was so funny. They were all lived in his head. So yes, and in the succeeding years, he's given away to a few different people to be the showrunner of the show for different chunks of time. And I know that was probably not easy for him at first, but I think now, you know, he's been gone from the room full time pretty much for a decade. So he's obviously gotten fairly comfortable with the people who have taken over running the show for him, and if he ever has any kind of notes or comments, he's, you know, he doesn't hesitate to let us know, but he's pretty hands off.
What the hell is this?
What the hell are you doing? The hell it is.
Where the hell is Jasper? Where the hell is Louis?
Is what the hell a phrase, a line that has to be in each of the shows? Because I read this, I think, on IMDb. What the hell? It has to be like, it's mandatory for each episode.
Absolutely not.
Okay, yeah.
I think that only speaks to us being lazy and having limited vocabulary. we would say that all the time. I mean, I'm sure it's Peter who says it most of the time.
Yeah.
But it's just laziness.